Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Thursday, October 16, 2025. President Donald Trump speaks by phone with Russian President Vladimir Putin and announces they will be meeting in Budapest, Hungary in the coming weeks to discuss how to end what President Trump calls an inglorious war between Russia and Ukraine. President Trump will be meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky at the White House on Friday to discuss possibly sending Tomahawk long-range missiles to Ukraine. Venezuela brings the matter of what it calls President Trump's bellicose language to the United Nations Security Council. President Trump confirmed Wednesday that he secretly authorized the CIA to conduct covert action in Venezuela to put pressure on President Nicolas Maduro and was considering military strikes on Venezuelan territory to combat illegal drug smuggling. U.S. government shutdown is on day 16 and will go through the weekend after the Senate rejected for the 10th time a Republican proposal to temporarily fund the government and did not advance a standalone defense spending bill. Democrats are pushing back on Republicans calling the No Kings protest planned for Saturday around the country Hate America rallies. Former National Security Advisor in the first Trump administration, John Bolton, has been indicted in a matter related to classified documents. President Trump announces new steps designed to expand access to in vitro fertilization, IVF. And the president also presenting models of a proposed Independence Arch he wants to build near the Lincoln Memorial as part of America's 250th anniversary in 2026. That and much more coming ahead on Washington Today. Associated Press writing President Donald Trump said Thursday he will meet again with Russia's Vladimir Putin in an effort to end the war in Ukraine. A date has not been set, but Trump wrote on social media that the meeting would take place in Budapest, Hungary. He wrote after talking to Putin, "I believe great progress was made with today's telephone conversation." AP writes they previously met in Alaska in August, which did not produce a diplomatic breakthrough. Before Trump and Putin meet, U.S. officials led by Secretary of State Marco Rubio will sit down with Russian representatives next week. It's unclear where that meeting will take place. The call came ahead of Trump's meeting on Friday at the White House with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who has been pressing Trump to sell Kyiv Tomahawk missiles that will allow Ukrainian forces to strike deeper into Russian territory. Reporting from AP. President Trump answered a reporter's question about this in the White House Oval Office today.
You also posted about your call with President Putin today, and you spoke about the meeting in Hungary with him. Do you have a timeline or a date set for when?
I would say within 2 weeks or so. Pretty quick. Marco Rubio is going to be meeting with his counterpart, as you know, Lavrov, and they'll be meeting pretty soon. They're going to set up a time and a place very shortly. Maybe it's already set up. They've already spoken. And I thought it was a very good phone call. I thought very productive. But I'll be meeting with President Putin, and we'll make a determination. Tomorrow I'm meeting with President Zelensky, and I'll be telling him about the call. I mean, we have a problem. They don't get along too well, those two, and it's sometimes tough to have meetings, so we may do something where we're separate but equal. We'll meet and talk parties, but this is a terrible relationship the two of them have, and it's one of those things. I've seen things that nobody would believe, but this is one of them. So we're going to be meeting in Hungary. Viktor Orban is going to be hosting, and it's really something that's time. Last week, over 7,000 people were killed. That's ridiculous. And, you know, it doesn't affect our country. We're not losing people. We're not losing Bobby. We're not losing Americans. But they're losing Russians, Ukrainians, mostly soldiers, for the most part, soldiers. And we hope we're going to get it stopped. I thought this would be, because of my relationship with President Putin, I thought this would be very quick. And it's turned out to be, who would think I did Middle East before I did this? We did a total of 8 now, 7 and now 8. And we're going to make this number 9.
President Donald Trump with reporters in the White House Oval Office. Also from Associated Press, Russia battered Ukraine's energy facilities with hundreds of drones and dozens of missiles in its latest heavy bombardment of the country's power grid, authorities said Thursday, as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky prepared to ask President Trump at a White House meeting for more American-made air defense and long-range missiles. Speaking of the Middle East, from Times of Israel, President Donald Trump warns if Hamas continues to kill people in Gaza, which was not the deal, we will have no choice but to go in and kill them. The Truth Social message caps off a 48-hour reversal of Trump's position on Hamas's summary execution of several dozen Palestinians from rival gangs and Gazans it has accused of collaborating with Israel. Trump claimed on Tuesday that he had given Hamas approval for a period of time to carry out the killings, asserting that Hamas was targeting some very bad gangs. By Wednesday, though, the commander of U.S. forces in the Middle East called on Hamas to immediately stop attacks on innocent Palestinian civilians. Hours later, Trump told CNN he was doing more research on it. It could be gangs plus. That was the reporting from the Times of Israel. And President Trump in the White House Oval Office got asked about his post.
Previously, you did not seem to be bothered regarding Hamas cracking down on what you called gangs. Actually, a couple of gangs. And today you issued a threat against Hamas on Truth Social. What has changed?
And what was said? Go ahead.
You said if they continue keep killing innocents in Gaza, that if that continues, the United States will go after them.
I know, I issued a strong statement, that's right.
But they used to be gangs, and now you're saying innocents. What made you think they're innocents now?
Well, I'm looking at what's happening, and that wasn't the deal that was made, and we'll see what happens. It's calmed down. It's a tough neighborhood, we know that. We have a commitment from them, and I assume they're going to honor that commitment. I hope they do. And I understand they brought back some additional bodies today. It's a rough deal when you think of it, right? Very rough. And we have our hostages back completely. We were very lucky with that. But it's a tough situation. They brought back bodies today, as you probably know. But they also said they're going to behave. We're going to find out if they behave. If they behave good, if they don't behave, we'll take care of it. Yeah, please.
Following up on that, Mr. President.
I didn't say you. You CNN, fake news. Go ahead.
You said in your post that if they kept killing people in Gaza, we would have no choice but to go in and kill them. So do you mean U.S. forces would go in and take out Hamas?
No, I didn't say who would go in, but somebody will go in. It's not going to be us. We won't have to. There are people very close, very nearby that will go in. They'll do the trick very easily, but under our auspices.
President Donald Trump in the White House Oval Office. And a story from CNN. The State Department has deployed a disaster assistance response team, DART, to help surge and coordinate aid into Gaza as part of the ceasefire agreement, the agency said today. President Trump on Wednesday made some comments about Venezuela, and Venezuela is responding today at the United Nations. As the New York Times reported, the Trump administration has secretly authorized the CIA to conduct covert action in Venezuela, according to U.S. officials, stepping up a campaign against Nicolas Maduro, the country's authoritarian leader. The authorization is the latest step in the Trump administration's intensifying pressure campaign against Venezuela. For weeks, the U.S. military has been targeting boats off the Venezuelan coast it says are transporting drugs, killing 27 people. American officials have been clear privately that the end goal is to drive Mr. Maduro from power. Mr. Trump acknowledged on Wednesday that he had authorized the covert action and said the United States was considering strikes on Venezuelan territory. That was from the New York Times. Venezuela's ambassador to the United Nations, Samuel Moncada, spoke at the UN in New York City.
Yesterday, on October 14, 2025, the government of the United States of America carried out a new set of extrajudicial executions against civilians who were aboard a small stationary boat in the Caribbean Sea, just a few miles off the coast of Venezuela. Recent reports of public domain have identified two humble fishermen from the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago among the victims. Their relatives indicate that those who were assassinated were engaged in fishing activities at the time. This act is yet another chapter in the escalation of the U.S. strikes carried out since September to date against civilian vessels transiting international waters in the Caribbean Sea, which have so far resulted in 5 lethal attacks and 27 deaths. Everything indicates, therefore, that there is an international crime going on affecting the entire Latin American and Caribbean region. There are victims from Colombia and from Trinidad already recognized. It's not just Venezuela. The recent attacks in the Caribbean Sea represent a point of maximum tension for peace and stability in Venezuela. The U.S. government is has made and revealed that considering launching armed attacks on land, which would be contrary to the provisions of Article 2.4 of the Charter of the United Nations. Adding to this alarming situation is a recent decision by the White House, according to which the Trump administration has, quotations, open quotations, the Trump administration has secretly authorized the CIA to conduct covert actions in Venezuela. The new authorization would allow the CIA to carry out lethal operations in Venezuela and conduct a series of operations in the Caribbean. In Latin America and the Caribbean, as in other regions of the world, the CIA is well known for its covert operations aimed at pushing processes of destabilization, sabotage, counterinsurgency, plannings of coup d'etat, and assassinations of heads of state and government, with the purpose of installing political systems subservient to the interests of the US government, puppet governments. All these actions previously described constitute an escalation in at least three directions: a major warmongering propaganda operation, a military escalation, and a clandestine intelligence plot with a license to kill in order to impose a coup d'etat in the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela.
The Venezuelan ambassador to the United Nations, Samuel Moncada, at the UN in New York City, as he asked the United Nations Security Council to take up this matter. The Pentagon says there are about 10,000 military personnel in the Caribbean region supporting anti-drug operations. This is Washington Today. Story from the Hill. U.S. Senate Democrats voted Thursday to block the annual full-year defense appropriations bill. Despite the measure passing out of committee with strong bipartisan support earlier this year, the vote is the latest sign of deteriorating bipartisan relations on Capitol Hill as the government shutdown drags into a third week. The Senate voted 50-44 against proceeding to the bill after Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer of New York objected to considering the defense spending bill without also voting on the annual Labor, Health, and Human Services appropriations bill. It needed 60 votes to advance. The vote on the defense bill followed an earlier vote on a House-passed continuing resolution to fund the government through November 21st. Senate Democrats defeated that measure for the 10th time. That's from the Hill. Senator Chris Coons, Democrat from Delaware, ranking member on the Appropriations Subcommittee on Defense, spoke on the Senate floor before the procedural vote on the defense spending bill about that bill and the government shutdown, and the Democrats' insistence that an extension of expiring Affordable Care Act health insurance enhanced subsidies be included on any bill to reopen the government.
Americans care deeply about security, about the security that comes from knowing that you and your family won't suddenly be bankrupted by unexpected health care costs, the loss of health insurance, and the security that comes from knowing that millions of highly skilled, trained, and dedicated American men and women are on the line around the world, shoulder to shoulder with our allies, defending America's security and that of the world. And we need a path towards addressing both. The federal government is currently shut down because we can't come to an agreement here in the Senate, with the President, with the House, to deal with the expiring Affordable Care Act tax credits that make it affordable. Letters are about to go out in my home state of Delaware that'll tell folks who get their health insurance through the Affordable Care Act their rates are going to go up dramatically, in many cases more than 100%, because of expiring tax credits. Well, what's that got to do with national defense? Bluntly, the process here in this Senate, the process with our president, the process of spending or not spending appropriated funds has destroyed a lot of the trust that is essential for the Senate as a body to work, for the Congress to legislate, for our federal government to reopen. In the last Congress, I was the chair of the subcommittee that wrote the appropriations bill. Roughly $32 billion went to USAID, an agency that no longer exists. Some of you may remember Doge, an Elon Musk-led effort to get into and tear up, and in the case of USAID, tear apart our long-standing, decades-old U.S. foreign assistance program. It did a lot more damage than just that. But in many ways, the actions that began in January and picked up speed in the spring caused alarm and concern by many of us in the Senate that we have an OMB director and an administration willing to violate bipartisan agreements from the last Congress, commitments to spend money, contracts and agreements with partners and allies around the world and across many different areas. In fact, just yesterday, a federal district court judge in California ruled that the reductions in force, the layoffs, the RIFs announced by the administration during this current shutdown were illegal because they were targeted and partisan. So many things have happened this year, it's tough to keep track. But the combination of them has led to a reduction in trust between our two caucuses, trust that is essential to our having an understanding and agreement to move forward.
Senator Chris Coons, Democrat from Delaware. He's the ranking member on the Defense Appropriations Subcommittee on the Senate floor before the Senate voted not to proceed to a defense spending bill full fiscal year. The vote was 50 to 44, short of the 60 votes needed. There were 3 Democrats who joined with Republicans to vote yes: Cortez Masto of Nevada, Fetterman of Pennsylvania, and Shaheen of New Hampshire. The Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Republican of South Dakota, switched his vote from yes to no, and that allows him to call for a revote next week. Senator Thune spoke on the Senate floor after the vote on the defense spending bill for the entire fiscal year, and also the bill to temporarily fund the entire government and end the shutdown, which failed again today.
Well, Mr. President, the Democrat Party is the party that will not take yes for an answer. We offer Democrats a clean, nonpartisan CR, no Republican policies for them to swallow, nothing for them to object to. They said no. We offer to accommodate their health care demands by guaranteeing them a vote on their proposal if they vote to reopen the government. The answer is no. Okay, fine. So we thought if they don't want to fund the government via continuing resolution, we'll give them the chance to fund the government a different way by attempting to move forward with regular order appropriations bills. And once again, the answer was no. Democrats just voted to block the fiscal year 2026 defense appropriations bill, a bill, I would add, that passed the Senate Appropriations Committee by a robust bipartisan margin. 26-3, I think it was. That's right, Mr. President. After voting last week for an authorization bill to increase troop pay, Democrats just voted against the bill that would actually pay the troops. We have to ask the question, why, Mr. President? Because, to quote a recent news story, this is a direct quote, voting to proceed with the defense bill relinquishes some of the party's leverage, end quote. Relinquishes some of the party's leverage. I mean, who really cares, right? If the troops are paid, as long as the Democrats are able to get what they want.
Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Republican of South Dakota, today on the Senate floor. The Senate is not in session on Friday, so the federal government shutdown will go through at least Monday, which will be day number 20. It's a story from Politico. The Senate's financial clerk notified all Senate employees Thursday afternoon that they will not receive any paycheck until after the shutdown ends. In a new letter, Ted Ruckner, the Senate's financial clerk, confirmed to all Senate staffers and employees they will not receive their next paycheck on October 20th if no resolution is reached by the end of the day. Senate Democrats, noting Politico, just voted down the GOP-led stopgap for the 10th time earlier Thursday, guaranteeing the missed paychecks. That was from Politico. Federal Reserve Board member Stephen Myron talked today about the state of the economy and the future of interest rates. He was at the Semaphore World Economy Summit in Washington, D.C.
two obvious arguments for cutting rates would be that the job market is weakening and weaker than we think, or perhaps that inflation is either more stubborn or that the flow through of tariffs is going to eventually kind of start showing up in inflation a bit more than it has. You haven't really made either of those arguments, and neither really has the White House. So what is the clearest case that you have for why interest rates should be significantly lower, assuming you were that bottom dot on the plot in September, which I think is probably a fair assumption?
It is a fair assumption.
Okay, confirmed. Making some news here. Significant rate cuts from here is sort of where you think we ought to be. So why?
Sure. There's two reasons. One relates to inflation. So I'm more sanguine on the inflation outlook than a lot of my colleagues on the Federal Reserve. Part of that is because I expect significant disinflationary pressure to come through the shelter channels. Housing is the biggest expense for most people. It's 45% of core CPI, about half that of core PCE. It's the most salient cost of living too, is the rent check or mortgage that you write every month. There are reasons for thinking that the way that this is calculated is that the actual rent increase hits you when you renew your lease. And so if the rents that you see on Zillow or markets, or market rents, if you're actually signing a lease, are running at a given level, it'll take a while for you to catch up to that, because you have to wait to reset your lease once a year, once every 2 years, once every 6 months, whatever it is. And so there's a lag with which the actual change in market rents hits measured inflation, and until measured inflation catches up to actual market rents, there's a significant lag, right? That lag is finally closed, which means that measured inflation can catch down to where market rents are, and those rents have been running about 1% a year. The other reason why shelter inflation is going to come in materially lower in my expectation is because of changing population policy. We had significant inflows of immigrants in previous years. That inflow has come down probably to negative this year, and once you count the deportations that have occurred. There's significant economic evidence that immigration causes increases in shelter costs, because for most things, if you add one person to the economy, most markets don't necessarily change the supply-demand imbalance. You have an additional worker, but that worker is also consuming goods and services, food, shelter, other things that create labor demand. And so there's not necessarily a strong inflationary pressure through most channels. Housing is the exception, because the housing stock is relatively fixed in the short run. And if you airdrop 10 million people into the country, you're going to drive rents up. If you take 10 million people out of the country, you're going to drive rents down, because the supply of housing is relatively fixed. And this channel is, in my opinion, very important and a very significant driver of inflation. So I'm a lot more sanguine on that outlook.
Stephen Myron, member of the Federal Reserve Board of Governors at the Semaphore World Economy Summit in Washington, D.C. today. And on Wall Street, the Dow down 301, and NASDAQ down 107, S&P down 41. CNBC reporting that President Donald Trump's tariffs will cost global businesses upward of $1.2 trillion in 2025, with most of the cost being passed on to consumers, according to a new analysis from S&P Global. In a white paper released Thursday, the firm said its estimate of additional expenses for companies is probably conservative. The price tag comes from information provided by some 15,000 sell-side analysts across 9,000 companies who contribute to S&P and its proprietary research indexes. That was from CNBC. CEO of Walmart, John Furner, spoke about the effects of tariffs on prices at his company at the Semaphore World Economy Summit in Washington. This happened on Wednesday.
As you say, you have a lot of leverage over suppliers. Are you seeing suppliers, particularly ones that are hit by the tariffs, start to raise prices?
That's always an interesting question. I think of supplier relationships. We have a lot of long-term supplier relationships, and it takes collaboration. We want suppliers to be in the position where they can innovate and they can develop new products. And this is an economy that's been based on innovation and productivity for a long time. So there are places where some prices have changed. There are other places where they've come down. We try to take a step back and look at what's going on across the entire portfolio. While there are some categories that are up, there are others that are down. But generally speaking, we're proud of our price position. Just in the last couple months, we have a program called Rollbacks. I'm sure some of you have heard of that if you either have been a supplier at our stores or on our site. We have about 7,000 rollbacks right now, and that's up pretty substantially from where we were at the beginning of the year. So our teams have spent a lot of time doing what they can to find efficiency so that our customers are finding value, and we're keeping prices in the best possible position we can going into the back half of the year.
But I guess how, I think nobody has the amount of ability to absorb and be flexible around price, suppliers' prices as you do, and a lot of your competitors will pass things more directly to consumers. Stepping back, I guess, in a way from Walmart a little, like how concerned are you that we're going to see inflation you tick up this year? I mean, how much are you thinking about it? There's a really wide range of predictions at this point.
Yeah, I would anchor that answer in what I said earlier about the consumer balance sheet. Employment's been pretty strong, wages have been strong, balance sheets have been pretty strong across the board. I think we've been operating.
Are you seeing pressure on wages?
We've raised wages over the last 4 to 5 years about 30%. The country has definitely had some increased wages, which is good, by the way, for individuals and for families. But in terms of our associate base, we're in a good spot. We're in a good spot going into the back half of the year.
Walmart CEO John Furner at the Semaphore World Economic Summit in Washington on Wednesday. International Monetary Fund Chief Kristalina Georgieva, writes Reuters, on Thursday urged member countries to keep trade as an engine of growth for the world economy despite President Donald Trump's steep new tariffs, warning that a larger-scale trade war could have negative consequences. Georgieva, speaking to reporters at the annual meetings of the IMF and World Bank, mapped out a sober view of a global economy that was doing better than feared when IMF and World Bank members last gathered in Washington in April, but still faced many risks, including inflation, high debt, and growing unrest in countries around the world. That's the reporting from Reuters. Here is part of the news conference with the IMF chief.
When we gathered here 6 months ago at our spring meetings, there was a lot of anxiety about the state of the global economy. I'm sure you remember that. Then we predicted a considerable slowdown in growth, but no recession. 6 months on, where do we stand? In a nutshell, better than feared, but worse than needed. And uncertainty has continued to go up, 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 gold values too. As you saw in our latest World Economic Outlook, global growth has held fairly steady and is projected to slow from 3.3% last year to 3.2% this year and 3.1% in 2026. That's better than we feared, better than we projected 6 months ago. So the question is, why has the global economy shown such resilience in the face of uncertainty and profound transformations in geopolitics, in technology, in trade relations, in demography? I can give you two core reasons. First, improved policy fundamentals. Since the global financial crisis, many countries, especially emerging markets, we have a chapter on emerging markets policy fundamentals, have pursued sound policies. They have strengthened their institutions. They have strengthened their frameworks. This investment is paying off, and if I may say, stay the course. Second, the adaptability of the private sector, which has shown agility in import front-loading, in supply chain strengthening, in just navigating uncertainty, is quite remarkable. But even so, the outlook we have is underwhelming. Medium-term growth prospects remain weak. Public debt is near record highs and continues to climb, and the global economy is excessively imbalanced. The forces of change are making the global economy less predictable, and it is impacting people. People are anxious. They're taking to the streets to demand better opportunities.
International Monetary Fund Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva at a news conference in Washington, part of the IMF World Bank's annual meetings. Another Reuters article on another part of her news conference reads that the International Monetary Fund is urging countries to pay more attention to risks that may be building in non-bank lending markets after the collapse of two U.S. automotive firms. IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva said on Thursday, and she's referring to the bankruptcies last month of auto parts maker First Brands and subprime car lender Tricolor. This is Washington Today. From the Washington Post, President Donald Trump on Thursday announced two initiatives that he said would make in vitro fertilization more accessible and affordable, casting the moves as part of his broader agenda to expand access to fertility benefits and lower drug prices. Trump administration will soon issue guidance encouraging employers to offer fertility benefits directly to their employees, the president said. The president also described a new arrangement that he said would significantly reduce the cost of a fertility medication used in IVF cycles. The president had previously promised to mandate coverage of IVF services, a process thousands of people use each year to create families, and a White House announcement had been awaited for months. That was from the Washington Post. Here is the president in the Oval Office.
In the Trump administration, we want to make it easier for all couples to have babies, raise children, and start the families they've always dreamed about. That's why today I'm pleased to announce that after extensive negotiations, EMD Serono, the largest fertility drug manufacturer in the world, has agreed to provide massive discounts to all fertility drugs they sell in the United States, including the most popular drug of all, the IVF drug Gonal-F. So it's Gonal-F. Is that a proper pronunciation?
Very
Close
well
enough,
done.
right?
Very well done.
Gonal-F. As part of this agreement, EMD Serono will list their fertility drugs online at trumprx.gov at very, very heavily reduced prices that you won't even believe. And ultimately, that's because of the favored nations. In addition, the FDA will be working with the company to expedite review and approval of another common fertility IVF drug, and currently it's selling in Europe. It's Pergoveris. And that's a sound nice name. Pergoveris. Why can't you name them nice, simple names? Nice, easy names. Doesn't matter. If it works, that's all we care about, right? Upon approval, this drug would directly compete against a much more expensive option that currently has a monopoly in the American market, and this will bring down costs very significantly. And the other one's going to have to come down also. Finally, EMD Serono has agreed that all future drugs and everything that it develops and sells in the United States will be offset at most favored nation prices. I've been after this for a long time, and we started the process in the last administration, and then we had a little thing called COVID that came up. We had to focus on that, did a good job on that too. And they'll bring a significant portion of their drug manufacturing back to the United States. So they're going to bring it largely back into the United States, and that's for a lot of reasons, but primarily because of the election result, November 5th, and maybe most importantly because of the tariffs, because if they do it here, there are no tariffs. So we're going to be very close, I think, by the end of this year. We're going to be very close to $20 trillion in investment. As an example, the Biden administration had less than $1 trillion, substantially less than $1 trillion for 4 years, Maria. Can you imagine? 4 years, less than one. We're going to break $20 trillion of investment, and we're already over $17 trillion, and that's in 8 months. Can you believe that? And he was at less than $1 trillion. And in addition to that, he had open borders, allowing millions of people to pour in. What an administration that was. Worst president in history, by far. As a result of these actions, the per-cycle cost of drugs used in IVF will fall by an estimated 73% for American consumers, and the numbers are going to actually be very substantially higher as time goes by when it really kicks in.
President Donald Trump in the White House Oval Office, joined by his health officials, also Senator Katie Britt, Republican of Alabama. You can find the full event on his IVF access announcement at our website, cspan.org. Washington Today continues in a moment.
If you ever miss any of C-SPAN's coverage, you can find it anytime online at cspan.org. Videos of key hearings, debates, and other events feature markers that guide you to interesting and newsworthy highlights. These points of interest markers appear on the right-hand side of your screen when you hit play on select videos. This timeline tool makes it easy to quickly get an idea of what was debated and decided in Washington. Scroll through and spend a few minutes on C-SPAN's points of interest.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you get your podcasts. NBC News reporting a federal grand jury indicted former National Security Advisor John Bolton on Thursday, making him the third critic of President Donald Trump to face criminal charges in recent weeks. Bolton was indicted in federal court in Maryland, where he lives, and where prosecutors have been investigating whether he improperly retained classified materials following his acrimonious departure from the first Trump administration. The indictment charges him with 8 counts of transmission of national defense information and 10 counts of retention of national defense information. The other 2 prominent Trump adversaries to face charges in recent weeks are former FBI Director James Comey and New York Attorney General Letitia James. That was from NBC News. Reporters asked President Trump about this in the White House Oval Office.
John Bolton was just indicted by a grand jury in Maryland. Do you have a reaction to that?
I didn't know that. You tell me for the first time, but I think he's, a bad person. I think he's a bad guy. Yeah, he's a bad guy. It's too bad, but that's the way it goes.
The case against him?
That's the way it goes, right? That's the way it goes. Will I what?
Have you reviewed the case against him?
No, I haven't. But I just think he's a bad person. Okay, anybody else?
President Donald Trump in the White House Oval Office. Again, from the NBC News article, Attorney General Pam Bondi said in a statement after John Bolton was charged, "There is one tier of justice for all Americans. Anyone who abuses a position of power and jeopardizes our national security will be held accountable. No one is above the law." FBI Director Kash Patel said charges came after the Bureau's investigation revealed that John Bolton allegedly transmitted top-secret information using personal online accounts and retained said documents in his house in direct violation of federal law. And Bolton's lawyer, Abby Lowell, with a statement, "The underlying facts in this case were investigated and resolved years ago. These charges stem from portions of Ambassador Bolton's personal diaries over his 45-year career, records that are unclassified, shared only with immediate family, and known to the FBI as far back as 2021. We look forward to proving once again that Ambassador Bolton did not unlawfully share or store any information." That was the statement from Abby Lowell, John Bolton's attorney, as reported by NBC News. Story from Axios. No Kings protest organizers expect millions to gather across the nation on Saturday, October 18th, in an event Republican lawmakers decry as a Hate America rally. The latest round of protests comes amid growing frustration about the ongoing government shutdown and widespread opposition to President Trump's military crackdown on Democratic-led cities across America. That was from Axios. C-SPAN will be covering the rally in Washington, D.C. on Saturday, starting at noon Eastern. You can listen on C-SPAN Radio or follow on C-SPAN Television and on our free app, C-SPAN Now. Senator Chris Murphy, Democrat of Connecticut, posted a video about the protests and how Republicans have been characterizing them.
So the big No Kings protest is coming up on Saturday. This is a really important day. It's a day for this country to stand up and say that we've had enough with the destruction of democracy, the building of Trump's censorship state, the evisceration of our health care. But it's pretty incredible how Republicans are showing their true colors. They're showing us how much they hate democracy. They're showing us how much they hate free speech. The rhetoric is ramped up from Republican leaders in the last few days. These aren't sort of fringe actors in the conservative movement. These are the leaders of the House Republican Conference calling the protesters that are going to show up on Saturday terrorists, saying that No Kings is a hate rally. What Republicans are basically telling you is that they hate free speech. They hate free speech when it isn't conservative speech, when it isn't pro-Trump speech. If you offer any criticism of this government, then you hate America. That's ridiculous, un-American, and unpatriotic. The fact is, our country was founded on the idea that everyone has a right, a God-given right, a constitutionally protected right to speak up and protest your government, especially when you think they have become become lawless and corrupt. And so the idea that the people who are showing up to protest Trump are terrorists, trying to get you to stay home. They're trying to get you to believe that simply by peacefully protesting your government, you're inciting violence. That is, of course, not true, but their tactics will work if we don't show up. Their tactics will end up in our democracy being destroyed if, by labeling you as terrorists, we decide to stay indoors. And so let's be there. Let's be there peacefully but forcefully protesting Trump's corruption. Let's show up in big numbers, whether it be at the rally in Washington, D.C. or at rallies all across this country. This is important. You don't back down when bullies try to silence you. You stand up and you speak up.
Senator Chris Murphy, Democrat from Connecticut, posting that video. Senator Ted Cruz, Republican of Texas, was on Fox News Channel Wednesday night talking about the No Kings rallies scheduled for Saturday.
One of the most important things President Trump has done recently is he has pledged that he's going to go after Antifa. And what I've been urging is follow the money, cut off the money. And you look at this No Kings rally, and there's considerable evidence that George Soros and his network is behind funding these rallies, which may well be riots all across the country. And Soros is writing the check. And so I've introduced legislation called the Stop Funders Act that would add rioting to the list of predicate offenses for RICO. Why is that? Because it would let the Department of Justice use RICO, racketeering, to prosecute the money that is funding the anti-Semitic protests on campuses, the pro-open border protest in L.A. and other cities, and these No King protests. Anyone that is supporting rioting and violence, it lets you go after the money. And I'll tell you, there are more than 200 left-wing groups behind these No Kings rallies this weekend. They deliberately are blind to what each of the others are doing. That's part of how they avoid accountability. RICO is designed for precisely that sort of criminal enterprise. And so I believe the Senate, we ought to take up and vote on and pass our Stop Funders legislation. And I've urged both Pam Bondi at DOJ and Kash Patel at FBI, follow the money and prosecute those who are writing checks funding acts of violence, political violence or otherwise, across the country.
Senator Ted Cruz, Republican of Texas, on Fox News Wednesday night, and the Texas Tribune writing that Governor Greg Abbott, a Republican, is deploying the state's National Guard to Austin ahead of planned Saturday protests condemning aggressive immigration enforcement. Abbott, in a press release, said he's directing the Texas Department of Public Safety to activate the Texas National Guard because of a planned Antifa-linked demonstration. Abbott said Texas will deter criminal mischief and will work with local law enforcement to arrest anyone engaging in acts of violence or damaging property. That was from the Texas Tribune. The No Kings rally organizers say more than 2,500 events are planned in all 50 states on Saturday. And again, you can listen and watch the rally in Washington, D.C. on the C-SPAN networks starting Saturday at noon Eastern here on C-SPAN Radio, also C-SPAN Television, streamed at cspan.org, and on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app. Border Czar Tom Homan rejected reports that he took a $50,000 bribe from federal agents, writes Politico, his most forceful denial yet of his alleged involvement in an FBI corruption investigation. I didn't take $50,000 from anybody, Homan said in a Wednesday night appearance on News Nation's Cuomo Town Hall. MSNBC first reported last month that the FBI recorded Homan accepting $50,000 in cash from agents posing as business executives seeking government contracts in an undercover operation before he began his role in the Trump administration. That was from Politico. Here is Tom Homan with Bill O'Reilly Wednesday night.
George Stephanopoulos is one of your best friends. He convicted you on television, okay, of a $50,000 bribe. Stephanopoulos did this on ABC. The vice president, J.D. Vance, defended you. And I thought he did so pretty well, because due process is important. Do you want to clarify anything about that situation?
I didn't take $50,000 from anybody.
Okay. How did that get into the mainstream, do you think?
I have no idea. Look, there's been hit pieces on me since I came back to this administration. There's got to be 30, 40 hit pieces on me about how I'm involved with contracts and government contracts, when in fact, day one I came back, I recused myself from any discussions on any contract or any monetary decisions like that, because I used to have a company that did consulting. So I cleared myself day one. What people don't talk about is I took a significant, huge pay cut to come back and serve my nation. And I'm not enriching myself doing this job.
Does this make you angry that they're coming at you this way?
I don't care what people think about me and never have. No, because I know who I am. I work for the greatest president in the history of this nation, in my opinion, and we're doing the right thing every day.
U.S. Border Czar Tom Homan on News Nation Wednesday night. Today, as he was walking past reporters in the White House driveway, he said he could not stop to answer questions because he was late for a meeting. A reporter asked him about the $50,000, and he responded, "Give me a break."
Mr. Homan?
I don't have time today, folks. I'm 20 minutes late. If I hit the plate, I'm sorry.
Did you take the $50,000 back?
Border Czar Tom Homan also said in a Fox News interview today, "I have not lived with my wife since last March because of death threats against me. And now there are reporters out there trying to find the location of my family. There are reporters trying to identify who my sons are." Story from the Washington Times, Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins said the U.S. has to wean its farmers off reliance on China, which is refusing to buy American soybeans and reigniting trade tensions with President Trump. Ms. Rollins said the administration is considering a special aid package for farmers that will go out once the government reopens, but the long-term goal is to find non-Chinese markets through Mr. Trump's trade deals. Reporting from the Washington Times, Secretary Rollins spoke to reporters today in the White House driveway.
Can you give us details about the plan that you said the money's already going out to farmers?
Oh, the interview I just did. No, okay. Let me clarify that. So that is aid that was already apportioned and confirmed over the last year. That is the remainder of that aid, almost $13 billion, aside from any additional aid that we're considering right now. I was talking about it just now on Fox Business because with the shutdown, that aid has been frozen. But that is based on 2023 and 2024 farm losses. That is not based on the current loss that's happening. So we're still analyzing.
So how is the new aid going to go out, and how much are you talking about? Is it direct checks? What is it?
Well, we still don't know. I mean, there still are so many unknowns as the negotiations are continuing. We're going to have a couple of announcements next week on some good news, on some additional product moving out, our row crop commodities moving out into the world. And until we have a really good sense of exactly what the damage is, again, there could be a deal tomorrow. I don't think there will be. It's not my lane. But there could be a deal tomorrow where China agrees to buy all of the soybeans and sorghum, et cetera. So what we have done is ensured, per the president's direction, that these farmers will have a backstop if, in fact, we're not able to move these commodities out.
But even if there is no deal in China, is the administration solely waiting to see what happens with China? I mean, there are other countries that farmers, trade with. So
absolutely,
is it just China that you're guys
it is not just China. Thank you for allowing me to clarify that. So just last week, in fact, unfortunately, I was supposed to be in Japan working to move the soybeans and sorghum and others out to Japan. There are countries all over the world. We're actually in discussions with some South American countries to do some crushing there for our soybeans and others. So no, I mean, this is the genius, I believe, of my boss, that while we have this short-term sort of back and forth that is not good for our farmers, especially our row croppers, for the long term, we are opening up these markets so that we are not so reliant on countries like China that can at any moment, pull the rug out from under us. If China just abided by their original commitment to buy these products back in 2019 under the first Trump agreement, then we wouldn't even be having this conversation right now.
Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins speaking to reporters today in the White House driveway. And finally, on Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio, this from Forbes. President Donald Trump unveiled plans to build a massive arch across from the Lincoln Memorial akin to Paris's Arc de Triomphe to mark America's 250th anniversary. President Trump presented drawings of the arch across the Potomac River from the Lincoln Memorial to his supporters and financial backers of his massive White House ballroom project, including representatives from Microsoft, Meta, Google, Amazon, Lockheed Martin, T-Mobile, Tether, and Palantir, according to the White House. That was from Forbes. Here's President Trump Wednesday night at that dinner at the White House.
And we show another building. It's an arc. It's the arc. So that circle, that's Arlington Memorial Bridge, as you know, that's sort of the most important one, a very important structure. And at the end of it, you have a circle that was built 150 years ago, nobody knows really when. And in fact, they put a couple of columns on each side. So you have two columns on one side, two columns on the other. But you have in the middle just a circle. And everyone that passes it said, something was supposed to be built there, and it's true. But a thing called the Civil War interfered. That's a good reason. I would say, Ike, that would be a good reason, right? The great Ike Perlmutter. The Civil War, if you said you're having a war, I think they have a good reason not to build. Again, you know, they were building the Washington Monument, and they stopped, and you can see where they stopped because the stone is a little different color when you get up to the middle. But anyway, they stopped here. And then they were, in 1902, they were going to put a statue of Robert E. Lee up. It would have been okay with me. A lot of people wouldn't have liked it, but it would have been okay with me. It would have been okay with a lot of the people in this room, but they didn't do that. And so for years and years it sat, and every time somebody rides over that beautiful bridge going right to the Lincoln Memorial, that's so beautiful, right? It's, they literally say, something's supposed to be here. And so we have versions of it, sizes of it, and it's going to be really beautiful. I think it's going to be fantastic. There's a rendering of what it will look like. You have 3 sizes. That would be the largest one. This is just a model of what it would look like in either of the 3, any of the 3 sizes, which is right here. I don't know if you can see it. It's sort of, that's Lady Liberty. Did you ever hear of Lady Liberty? On top. But, so the sizes would be very different. Now here's Lincoln, and this is sort of facing this way. And so, you know, there's a direct line. They did this, they didn't do that. So this would be, I go, small, medium, and large, right? Small, medium, and large. And whichever one, they look good. I happen to think the large looks by far the best.
President Donald Trump Wednesday night at a White House dinner for donors for the construction of the new White House ballroom that he is building, talking about this proposed arch. CNN writing about it. It was not immediately clear how the arch would be paid for. A source familiar with the matter said Washington, D.C. is the only major Western capital that lacks an arch. It's a time-honored tradition for celebrating events and people and ideas, and also for acting as gateways to cities. That was from CNN. And before we go, a programming reminder. C-SPAN's new weekly series, Ceasefire, airs tomorrow, 7 p.m. and 10 p.m. Eastern. Host Dasha Burns will sit down this week with Oklahoma Republican Governor Kevin Stitt and Maryland Democratic Governor Wes Moore, chair and vice chair, respectively, of the National Governors Association, for a bipartisan dialogue on the top issues facing states and the country. C-SPAN's Ceasefire, Friday, 7 p.m. and 10 p.m. Eastern. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Have a good night.
C-SPAN's Washington Journal, our live forum inviting you to discuss the latest issues in government, politics, and public policy from Washington and across the country. Coming up Friday morning, the president of the American Federation of Teachers, Randi Weingarten, discusses the government shutdown and her new book, Why Fascists Fear Teachers, Public Education and the Future of Democracy, and Manhattan Institute senior fellow Rafael Mangual on the Trump administration's efforts to crack down on violent crime nationwide. C-SPAN's Washington Journal. Join in the conversation live at 7 Eastern Friday morning on C-SPAN. C-SPAN Now, our free mobile app, or online at cspan.org.